The next subject I have, and this will probably pretty much be toward the end of it, to where we can just jump into specific questions you may have, is on species selection. And that's a big one. I actually have a book. Couldn't bring it with me today. I'm not sure where it's at. I must have loaned it to somebody. But it's called Right Plant, Right Place. And that's very important. You can walk around the nursery here and see just pretty much any plant for any type of condition that you want to plant in, whether it's a small area that you have in a patio, or whether it's a backyard where you want a large shade tree to grow. But you really have to think about not only what the place is now and what you're going to plant there, but what that plant is going to do 5, 10, 20, 30 years down the road, and how it's going to develop. So you have a small patio home, you certainly don't want to go in there and plant something like this willow oak that's going to rapidly outgrow the spot. Even something like this red maple here is going to get pretty big for a small backyard. This is one here that I had them bring up. This is an Okami cherry. Stays kind of small, a little more compact, doesn't get all that big. So you have a smaller backyard, this one might be much better suited for it. Ornamental tree, doesn't get real big, will provide you some shade over the years, but won't get so big that you end up taking out a huge tree in a small place. Different species have different success in certain areas. Sometimes in this area we do have problems with red maples. They develop there's a scale insect that will feed on them. So if you see red maples growing and they've got a few dead branches here and there, that's usually the one thing that we see that's causing major problems in some areas. And scale insects are hard to see. They actually just look like little tiny fish scales, and they'll be right on the bark of the tree, out on the limbs, just little tiny round. You can actually scrape them off with your fingernail. Take your thumbnail and you scrape them off the bark. But they will multiply very rapidly as the population gets established. And each one of those is sucking sap out of the plant and feeding on it. And so you can have some serious problems down the road once that population gets built up. And you start seeing dieback, you might see cankers developing on the trunk. You get a lot of problems developing just from that insect infestation. So it helps to have either know your problem and keep the problem under control. There are ways that you can control that with systemic insecticides. They make some now that you can just mix up and pour them around the base, and the plant takes up the insecticide internally and kills them. Works very effectively on it. But alternatives are go to other types of trees. We have willow oaks that do well here. A number of the other oak trees do pretty well. We have live oaks that will develop. But again, you've got to look at your species, look at your site. And what you want to develop into a given location.
Are there some shade trees that are better for wet areas versus dry areas, like maybe clay soil versus sandy soil?
There are trees that do better in certain sites than others. Wet site species, I know they've got a few bald cypress back here. Bald cypress, they grow in the swamps, they love it. The red maple, one of the common names that's used for red maple is swamp maple. They will actually grow in wet areas. Of course, the willows are one that people go to a lot. Elm trees will grow in wet areas. Here locally, if you go into a lot of the river bottoms, you'll see river birches growing. And not typically what you might see in a nursery, but some of the river birches might be 1 foot, 2 feet, 3 feet in diameter. They get huge down in the river bottom. So they will tolerate wet sites like that as well. Quite a few of them. Certain of the oaks, I think the pin oaks will grow in the wet sites, but typically most of the oaks are going to be more of a dry site species. So, to the average homeowner, really, as far as the differences between the different types of maples, certainly there is a difference. A lot of them are, you may have the Latin name Acer rubrum, which is red maple, and many of them are just cultivars and varieties of them. If you look around, all the people that are here right now, we're all Homo sapiens, we're all human beings, but we all look different. You're going to have trees that are the same species, an Acer rubrum, that from one to the other are going to look a little bit different. There'll be slight variations in the genetics that are going to make them look different. What you have in the nurseries now, there's a lot of cultivars where, in other words, you get a variation that looks nice. In other words, say, I know there's an Armstrong maple that grows very upright, narrow branches, great on the streets of a city, where you don't want something spreading out too much. So it's actually a cultivar that they use, and they will select branches from that to grow new ones so that they all have the same genetics. They're going to grow that way. And you get a lot of varieties that are in a nursery now. Different ones, like this one here, I believe is a red summer. Yeah, summer red maple. Selected, I'm assuming on this one for the color of its foliage. A lot of the maples are that way. October Glory is one that at a certain time of the year it really lights up, gets a nice color to it in the foliage. A lot of them are selected because of that. Sometimes because of the form that they grow, like I said with that one that has narrow branches, the Armstrong, others for the color of the foliage, some of them for the size, some of them might not get so big. So get a lot of variation. And then the cultivars in the nursery, it just depends on the site that you have. Again, going back to what I said, right plant, right place. Look at what you have, what you'd like to see growing there. If you like yellow foliage in the fall, if you like red or orange, typically the sugar maples get a brilliant orange color to them when they turn color in the fall. Red maples tend to be more of a reddish color. But again, you're going to get variation in there. So it's up to what you want in your landscape.
Cool weather.
Sugar maples typically are a cooler weather. Get up into the mountains, they do a little bit better. There's one variety, I believe a Florida maple, that's similar to the sugar maple, but it does better in the hot climate here. A lot of times when you get a plant, you've got to look at what zone it's from. And if it's something that typically grows in a semi-tropical area, you know, we have some colder winters here that it might not do too well. Things that are from further north that are used to the colder temperatures but not used to the extreme heat and humidity that we have, they may not do too well here either. So you really have to look at it. Most of the plants that you have are going to have a tag on them, or you can look it up in is what zone they normally grow in.